0 to 60 can define a performance car, but it's the fastest 60 to 0 that's the aim of Tarok's brakes. From road cars to race cars, circuits, special stages, or the autostrada, nothing reduces speed like Tarok's brakes. Italy gave the world the art of Da Vinci and Michelangelo. Tarok's has given drivers the art of stopping. For more information and to acquire your own masterpiece, visit tarox.co.uk. Yes, it's me, Mike Stone, and this is the Backseat Driver podcast. It's the fastest, it's the friendliest, and it's for all the family. The Gas Shocks 116 Trophy and 120 Coupe Cup are the fastest growing race series in the UK, taking in 6 one-hour races and 8 sprints at all the top circuits. Visit 116trophy.com to find out more and get yourself behind the wheel. From a pot of tea to TT motorbikes. From a classic English breakfast to a full serving of classic cars. Bridge House Tea Rooms is the Northwest premier classic car meeting location for cars, bikes, tractors and owners clubs. So no matter what your automotive appetite might be, visit Bridge House Farm Tea Rooms on their Facebook page or call John and Alicia on 07980 444 221 for show details and to reserve your own table and parking space. I'd like to introduce to the Backseat Driver a man who has been described as Paddy Hopkirk's best friend. He's a racing driver who rallied. He's a rally driver who raced. He was a team manager. Basically, when it comes to motorsport, Alec Poole has done it all. Alec, welcome to the Backseat Driver.
Thank you very much.
Now, I know you got into motorsport or cars by virtue of the fact your father was the importer of MG into the Republic of Ireland. So I suppose it was somewhat natural. Did he encourage you to get into motorsport, or did he just encourage you to get into cars?
I think fair to say he encouraged me to get into sport of any shape or form, and but it's just a natural thing in or progression because of the car stuff. You know what it's like as a kid. You get all the magazines, and you know more than you become a total nerd. And I was. And that was my my thing, really.
And of course, due to your father, it was MGs.
True. We had the other franchise like Woolsey and the trucks and tractors and so on.
Yeah.
But obviously the MG thing, because back then in the 60s, or the early 60s, and BMC, British Motor Corporation, were in their prime. They were the 4th biggest manufacturer of the world after the big 3 in America. It was big business.
Yeah. You know? So from Ireland, you were sent to BMC to serve a form of apprenticeship.
Sure, and that was into the depths of Brum, which was pretty. From going from boarding school into this lot to be into digs in the depths of Brum, and going into the winter. It was cold. It was foggy, and it was tough.
Yeah, but an innocent Irish lad.
Yeah, and worse than that, the other apprentices at the weekend, if they were from dealerships around the UK, they go home at the weekend.
Yeah,
and but in fact, but that in a way that encouraged our motorsport thing, because the few of us from abroad or from further to travel, we used to do any sort of motorsport we could get into, whether in any sort of wheels.
Yeah. So how did you get into motorsport?
Well, you see, back then you just needed a competition license to do anything. None of this division between racing and rallying.
Yeah.
So we would do anything, and then in fact. I was fortunate to pick up a Mark I Austin Healey Sprite, which was had been superseded to the Mark II, but nobody wanted those frog-eyed Sprites. And I started using that in events, but then progressed into rallying, and because I found that this these motoring news all-night road races in the depths of Wales were just the business. And I mean, they were madness, absolute madness. And in fact, one of my co-drivers was none other than John Fitzpatrick, who went on and still is a close friend. And Fitz, became the most successful GT driver of all time. And as I say, we crashed and rolled our way around Wales through the night, and absolute madness. But then, of course, as an apprentice, you were looking over your shoulder at BMC competitions department down at Abingdon, out in the country, which is also at the MG factory, and that was so much better than machining brake drums in the depths of Birmingham, that sort of thing. So that was really your target, to try to get down there.
How did the move come about? How did you manage to get yourself to the competition department?
Well, it didn't do you any harm to scrap material of, say, the brake drums and so on. So whatever department you were in, they'd move you on because. So that was one means, and of course you brown nose the apprentice supervisors to say, well, there's an affinity here, and you'd encourage him to transfer you, because you do months and you do a small period in different departments. But we were apprentices, though, back then were regarded as pond life. And we were always sort of lined up to do any horrible jobs, And sometimes it was a case of get rid of him. We don't need him around here. And you would do anything to get down to MGs, to either the development department or road test or competitions, of course.
So when you arrived there, what was your intended job?
Well, luckily, I was allocated to the competitions development engineer. And we had actually a good relationship in bouncing things, and he showed me the way he went about it, which in a way became a sort of an apprenticeship for competitions as well, rather than just dealership nous.
Because, I mean, technically this was all meant to go back to Ireland and your father's dealership.
But as it happened, sometime later, I built a racing Mini. At that time, I was racing the Sprite quite successfully in club racing. But BMC competitions then was very much around Mini Cooper S's and so on. And indeed, that's where I meeting Paddy and because Paddy won the Monte Carlo Rally in '64. And that was a mega event. That when afterwards, the Sunday that was finished on a Saturday. On a Sunday, Paddy and Henry Liddon appeared on Bruce Forsyth at the Saturday night at the Palladium. And they appeared on the turntable at the Palladium, and 28 million people saw it. I mean, that's how big it was. Well, it was then. But I then. After I left competition, went back to Ireland, I built a racing Mini. But in fact, I built it as a Wolseley Hornet because of the head of the dealership. And I won quite a few races and things in Ireland. And then I took it to the UK for weekends, won with that as well. And one day, I called into competitions to scrounge some parts. And the then Stuart Turner, the competition manager, he said, Poole, you've been winning races in my car, but the Hornet was on the trailer outside. He said, why, I need to have a chat with you, but why don't you get Cliff, the engineer I worked for as an apprentice, to put that thing on a rolling road, see what power it gives, because I'm curious to know if you're winning these races is you or the car. Anyhow, so we were having a chat about it, maybe a few events or doing something or other. And Cliff came into the office about half an hour later. You could have heard the thing on the rollers in the background. And he came in quite sheepishly and he said, I don't quite know how to say this, sir, but that Mini, or was it on the rollers, gives more power than I have ever seen on those rollers from a Mini before any of our cars. That's when Stuart got up, locked the door, and said, you, Poole, are not leaving here until we sort out the exact specification. And of course, he was so crazy. The first thing is, and the obvious thing is it oversized? Yeah. And I said, no. I couldn't tell him, of course, because it had his pistons, which I had nicked from his stores. But anyway, so yes, a good relationship with them, and good fun. Good.
So I conclude then you were signed up to be a driver for them.
Well, yeah, but I've got a problem because you can see from the shape that, my other sport used to be rugby, and as a second row forward, you have your heart in racing, but you then, after a while, you realize that this is never going to become a serious profession. Yeah. It is better to treat it as a golfer, a competitive amateur golfer would, and pick and choose if you can select right. But you're never going to be a Paddy Hopkirk or a Jimmy Clark,
Hidden away in the heart of the Ribble Valley, Specialised Automotive Services offer unrivalled levels of talent for all types of vehicles. All makes and models, old and new, are cared for with the exact same levels of detail. From accident repairs, paintwork, or even full bespoke bare metal resprays. Mechanical rebuilds to full replacement or modifications of defunct electrical systems. Specialised Automotive Services offer traditional engineering and mechanical skills along with the company's constantly updated digital systems and diagnostics. Each SAS technician embodies the SAS ethos of ensuring everything is in order and exactly as it should be. To arrange a guided tour of the workshops and the new vehicle finishing and detailing bay, call Dean on 01282 776 081 or visit sas-autos.co.uk. But in a roundabout way, you did become a Paddy Hopkirk or a Jimmy Clark. I mean, you from there, you ended up at Sebring, didn't you?
Yeah, luckily, I said the club racing was going well, along with a pal called Roger Renover, and they got us. Austin Healy, which is part of the British Motor Corporation group, asked us to go to Sebring, but we just went there as a couple of sort of 18-year-olds, and to add a little bit of interest, my girlfriend at the time was an Aer Lingus stewardess. Yeah. And she said to me, look, because it was this time of year, and she said in March, she said, along with the half a dozen of my mates, we're going to New York to St. Patrick's Day parade. And that's on Wednesdays. Why would you mind if we came down to Sebring with you to meet up with you and Roger for the weekend? It was incredible when we had these. Well, I was going to say chickettes, but they had quite a bit of style about them.
Yeah. Well, air hostesses are always stylish, aren't they? It's very sexist to say that now, but cabin crew are always stylish.
Yeah. So, all of a sudden, Roger and I, we were heroes, not because of our driving and anything, because of what we had in tow. And they were well turned out.
Yeah.
And in fact, as it happened, they took over the catering facilities for the whole BMC team.
Yeah.
Because that's what the girls did. They did proper meals then.
Yeah.
And that made the whole BMC team popular because the journos weren't interested in looking at GT40s or Cobras. They were much more interested in looking at these girls.
Nice girls and nice food.
Yeah.
How did the race go?
I think we finished second in our class.
Yeah,
but it was a small it was in a Group N or basic sort of category. So we didn't set the world on fire. But how could we? But But that wasn't really the point. As far as we were concerned with our driving, we were very popular.
Yeah. But it doesn't harm. I mean, back in the day, a lot of drivers did well because they were popular or because somebody noticed them.
Yeah, or a movie thing.
Or a movie thing or something like that. So, how did it move along from there? Because, there's the famous story of you overtaking Vic Elford at the Nordschleife, him in his Porsche, you in a Mini. You were told at Brands Hatch, driving an MGB, kindly slow down because we don't want you winning and beating Cobras and GT40s.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, actually, that Brands Hatch thing. We were Fort Roger and we were driving an MGB, a factory MGB. It wasn't at the time. We had borrowed a car from the factory because we had access to the back door.
Yeah,
and we.
Did they not notice one was missing?
Well, no, there was a slight change of colour along. Anyhow, being young, and having done a lot of club racing at Brands, and it was wet, and the conditions sort of suited us, so we were really on the edge.
Yeah,
You're quite right. The clerk of the course called me in when Roger was in the car saying, you guys are out of order. You're using all the track and a bit more, and I'm going to black flag you.
Yeah.
And I said, but why? We haven't. Has there been any complaints about us balking or holding anybody up? He said, no, that's not the point. But I cannot have an MGB, a thing like an MGB, win my race. I want a Porsche or a Cobra or something like that to win. So just let me tell you, the Stuart Clark of the course he was a good old boy, and he was actually he was a friend, but he said, I just want you and Roger to know that I am looking for an excuse to black flag you, to get you in.
Did playing the game give any benefits? Was there anything that came from that because you were, shall we say, played along?
Absolutely, and out of the blue, but nothing premeditated. But it must have been a few years later, because that race was sponsored by BOAC.
Yeah,
the BOAC manager in the Caribbean, out there, the club racers got in touch with the BOAC manager saying, "Will you sponsor some and fly some UK drivers out here in the winter or?" In our winter, so we can race again. So the request came through to Nick Syrett, because of his connection in motorsport, and we got a phone call from him, along with another driver, a good friend called Gordy Spice.
Yeah,
and that was how we managed to hit the Caribbean.
Yeah. So where did the rallying come along? Because back in the day, it's like Paddy and yourself. It's like I said, you raced, you rallied. There was no real differentiation. It's not differentiated. You did whatever came along.
Sure. And in fact, and more so in Ireland, because when the apprenticeship was over, go back to Ireland, there was at that initially no racetrack. So you would do rally, you do hill climbs, you would sprint, because they had the facility of closing the roads. And I used to do, through the winter, you do things like the Galway Rally, Donegal Rally, and so on. Anything on wheels.
Yeah.
And you just take your chances.
Yeah. So, what was the first major rally you drove in?
I suppose I managed to win the Galway Rally, but that was by default because the boys in Abingdon, my mum and dad lived in the Wicklow Hills, south of Dublin, and occasionally, they had a bit of a problem with the snow, so they gave Mum a set of studded wheels, tires and wheels and I did the Galway Rally and realised that it was unusual that there was going to be snow, so I borrowed Mum's wheels and tires, and we just aced the stages. So these things happen, and but I think with sport and things like that, if you see an opportunity, you just grab it with both hands.
Yeah. So from BMC and MGs and Healey's, etc., what did you move on to, colour-wise?
but then I was fortunate because the chemistry with Paddy, originally when Paddy was at his prime in the 60s, the other two Mini on the works team were guys called Timo Mäkinen and Rauno Aaltonen.
Yeah.
And like when Paddy would come to the competition shop department, he'd always be sort of taking me aside and said, "What have they specified for the next event?" You know, and I said, "Well, they've got this stuff," and he said, "Well, I must have that." And I said, "No, we've tried that. It's no good." And he said, "Well, what about such and such?" I said, "Don't you worry. I've already put another set on your car."
Yeah.
You know. So, so obviously got on well with Padlad, and indeed, the sort of thing that happened. He, before a few years later, the cars going to Sebring, we prepared or built in the competition shop, and Paddy sort of said, "I don't want to spend the week at Silverstone going round and round, making sure everything was pointed the right way." And he would arrange for me and for an apprentice to be told, "Next week, we want you to spend the whole week at Silverstone, and you'll be going through each car." Today, gloriously, people would call that testing. But in fact, it was just making sure that everything was right. So when
the front's better embedding in, make sure, because a lot of parts work better when they've done a few hundred miles.
Yeah, and things like that, the stupid things like the wipers weren't lifting and everything, it was full throttle and then there were rattles and squeaks and things. So it meant at the other end, in the States, when they got the cars out of the box, they could hit the ground running. But as an apprentice, when nobody else, there was no hierarchy. With a competitive team like that, where everybody is rowed in together. What a fantastic opportunity! Something that people today would pay a lot of money.
Oh yeah, the people will pay to go and do it.
Exactly.
And I conclude doing this meant that people like Stuart Turner and people like that will notice you. You get noticed more and more as somebody who did a good job and gave results. And I mean, at the end of the day, the only reason the manufacturers competed was for results, which was ultimately to sell cars.
Sure. Yeah, that was the name of the game. But also, when BMC were doing something like the RAC Rally, because I was a driver and knew how to throw spanners at things, I used to be Stuart's driver on driving the team car, the team manager's car, all round the rally. I was his chauffeur. And we had another good guy, another mech in the back of the barge, and ours was our high-speed chase car, really. So great opportunity, especially if you're young and terrific.
Because I mean, another famous event you did was the London to Sydney, wasn't it?
And in fact, how that happened was Paddy's regular co-driver was Tony Nash, and they decided they needed a third driver. And what do they need with a third driver was someone to share the driving and to perhaps fix it if it stopped. Because of like 10,000 miles. So that was my brief. Like I was saying about opportunity, but because back then, to get a trip to us, I mean, I felt that if this car broke down, whatever, well, I was going to carry it on my back. What an opportunity to get to, Australia. None of this casual stuff today of backpacking and kids. That wasn't invented in those days. Terrific opportunity.
Because you were driving the famous Land Crab, weren't you?
Yeah, the Austin 1800, and it was tough as old boots, thank goodness. Could have been quicker, but Pad was particularly quick downhill with the thing. Maybe that's because it was so heavy. I've since wondered if, in fact, he used to do that, sort of showing off to me that he was so he went that extra or tried that. But we were right in contention, and literally 100 miles from the end, we came across Lucien Bianchi,
Yeah.
who was leading in a work Citroën DS, and he'd had a head-on smash with another car, and both the cars were locked together and on fire. And we had a little fire extinguisher, like an aerosol fire extinguisher, and to our amazement, we put the fire out. I mean, this was serious because Lucien was trapped in the car, and we couldn't get at him because the door had compound. We couldn't open the door on one side, and the seat had ratcheted forward and had trapped his legs or his feet under the seat. Weird cars like that. We had no idea where the seat catch was. It could have been on the back seat.
Yes.
God only knows. But he was hurt, and he was unconscious. But anyway, that was it was sort of quite sobering. The whole that whole.
I'm going to say I think that was the one thing. I mean, I enjoy watching on YouTube a lot of the footage of the rallying from years ago, and the cars were nowhere near, shall we say, as well prepared as they are now. And everybody seemed to have a good time. But I think because of the cars and the construction, it's like in Formula One, the accidents were more severe back then, weren't they? Because the cars weren't as prepared as they are now.
Absolutely. I mean, we didn't... it was early days for safety belts, if at all. Fire extinguishers weren't come out. Roll cages weren't come. I mean, the only... thing with roll cages started to creep in to try to give the thing a bit more strength, rather than to prevent, to stop it getting crushed inside. Right? So all of that stuff, which we take for granted today, was, well, it's a bit like talking to kids. Children today, I'd say, grandchildren can't understand life. How did you live without a telephone? Without your,
So, I mean, from there you moved into management, didn't you? Because, I mean, your famous role was with Nissan, and unofficially, I don't know whether selling British-built Nissans to Nissan in Japan.
I was fortunate that to be invited or asked by Nissan this was in the early 90s then, or mid-90s, to sort out their touring car program, because in the UK, there was about 8 manufacturers involved with the BTCC. And Nissan were...
Because just looking in, you'd already proved yourself a touring car champion back in the late 60s behind the wheel of a Mini. So you had won the title.
But these sort of things, that fall your way, but then you're totally out of touch because,
not being from the late 60s, Minis bears no resemblance to a 90s Nissan touring car, does it?
I happened to know or had raced with the Nissan PR manager for Nissan Europe, and it was his budget that was draining away and getting nothing. And he had we had known each other back then, and he, out of the blue, he got in touch with me. This was like 20 years later, and I hadn't a clue what to do to sort it out. But as ever in things, whatever the job, like we're looking around this room, I know nothing there about curtains, but give me 10 days and I can become an expert on when you start getting your head down and start looking. So what I did was I had a word. I've always felt that watch what's going on in Formula One, and that will percolate down. And I happen to know a couple of Formula One design, notably the Jordan, through the Irish connection, designer Gary Anderson, and chat to him how he would tackle the thing. And anyhow, we built a prototype for the upcoming season, and it seemed to work very well with his guidance. And then we, in Japan, Nismo and Nissan Motorsport, they had been hadn't won a race all year, and they had their final.
Because the big thing with the Japanese is saving face, isn't it? Failure is not an acceptable thing.
So they asked us to take our prototype to Japan for the final race.
Yeah.
And one thing led to another with a little bit of craftiness in qualifying. With about 5 minutes to go, the qualifying was red flagged. So we had nothing else with us. So we just told Anthony, our driver, go down to wait at the traffic light at the end of the pit road. And he said, but I want to change this. I said, we've got nothing. We have nothing to change. But luckily, we said, but it is getting drier. It had been the downpour half an hour before. And if we're first out, you should be able to get a lap in, cross the start and finish line before many others.
Yeah.
So we go down there, and the Japanese are laughing at us because and they're doing final tweaks for about 20 minutes, getting all set, and they suddenly realize that they've got to get out quick because they've only got about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So we said to Anthony, pretend you can't start the thing. We want to stall. We want to jam the end of the pit road.
Yeah.
Anyhow, this duly happened, and we said, right, go. Eventually, like sort of 30 seconds after the green light had gone, we go, and off he went, and he got across he got into his final lap, and we put it on pole position.
Yeah.
The Nissan guys went crazy, and they said, right, this big problem with starting. We will get in touch in Tokyo with Hitachi. We will get them to make us a special starter, motor overnight, race prepared starter motor overnight. So this will not happen again. And we said, no, it's okay. We've sorted the problem. They said, no. To Alec, no, this is not good enough, And we said, we have things in hand, in one syllable, and eventually they say, so they realized that we went, that we went these sort of dumb foreigners, and we won the race. And the next day, on the Monday, we go back, and they get their driver, the Japanese driver, to try our race car, exactly as it was to finish the race. And I remember they had this big huddle and a meeting, and it crossed my mind, it must have been like, because in Japan the drivers are big heroes, race drivers, and they had this big huddle, and it crossed my mind, it must have been similar to a debrief from the pilots getting back from Pearl Harbor. They were really into, and eventually the drivers gave it his blessing. And they turned and said, right, we want to order 2 cars from you, from the UK, 2 Nissan Primeras, but one condition is, or the main condition is, nobody must know, because they just could not lose face, that they were having to buy Nissan Primeras from the UK for their championship, and glad to say they won everything with these 2 cars the following year.
Now, by your own admission, you're like me, you're no spring chicken anymore. Do you still compete? Do you still do anything?
I think you should, on my way up here to Lancashire from the south, I think you should just ask that woman in that Nissan that wanted my space on the roundabout.
And of all the cars you've driven, and of all the events you've driven in, which is your all-time favourite car? If you could have one of your race cars or rally cars back, which would you have? I know it's an unfair thing, because people who've driven at the level you have driven so many cars. They'd probably like quite a few of them back.
In the latter days of actually BMC, or even British Leyland, I built a turbocharged Mini, ultra light, and the thing gave about 190 horsepower.
Yeah.
And that thing was difficult to drive, but my goodness, did it go. And it's something like one racetrack called Phoenix Park, the road circuit, but it was quite bumpy. And I remember I got some of my pals said, Alec, that thing goes like the wind, and when you shut it off at the end, the flames come out the exhaust and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But they said, is it really necessary to do that showboating down the straight with overtaking one car on one side and the other on the other? Yeah. And I said, I actually can't help it. There's a mind of its own. But I did in, what was it? I think 78. I have a friend in the States, and he asked me to drive. He had a 3-liter RSR Porsche, ex Peter Gregg, and we finished third in Daytona 24-hour racing. Yeah. And that was a fantastic experience.
Alec Poole, I hope your career goes on for many years. And I would love to have sat and chatted with you more, because I know there's a lot of stories there, some of which we can't broadcast. But Alec Poole, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining me on the Backseat Driver.
Thank you very much.
Rarely beaten on price, never beaten on service. Whether it's cars, bikes or commercials, Hodder Tyres are the best in the business. And when it comes to tyre expertise and advice to supplying the correct tyres for your vehicle's specific requirements, nobody comes close to David Lakin and the Hodder Tyres team. So give them a call on 01200 613 192 or visit the website at hoddertyres.co.uk.